Welcome to the relay. We're covering today's top boxing news.
Okay, we'll start with this. Some recent comments from Shakur Stevenson in reference to a Gervonta-Davis fight. Comments that we've talked about in a previous video. Who am I to throw an offer to the biggest star in boxing?
I think that Shakur is being far too polite.
Because Gervonta-Davis isn't the biggest star in boxing to begin with. If he were, he'd be on the Forbes list like Anthony Joshua, like Canelo Alvarez, and he isn't.
Got enough people trying to put that butterball on a pedestal without Shakur doing it.
Honestly, the number one fight for me is Tank. Stevenson said on the $1 Million Worth of Game podcast. Me and Tank is the best fight. You can name 15 other fighters, but there's that one fight that truthfully needs to happen in boxing. I don't know, Stevenson said when asked why that particular fight has not been made. I can't tell you. I'm not Tank at the end of the day. I'm a real guy. I'm gonna tell you the truth. I'm not Tank. He's the big star. He's the pay-per-view star. I can't throw no offers to Tank. Who am I to throw an offer to the biggest star in boxing? What am I going to offer him? It doesn't make sense. That would have to be on their part, on their team, to want to do that.
Once again, I don't think that Shakur should be so politically correct in reference to Gervonta-Davis.
I want to do that. I would love that fight. I think that's the best fight in boxing if we're speaking skills-wise. He's not going to tell y'all that because, however, he be thinking the way that he thinks, but me, truthfully, I think that's the best fight in boxing, and I want to prove to the world who I truly am.
Box office success does not exonerate Gervonta-Davis from the responsibility to make the best fights possible. I mean, look at Canelo Alvarez. You've got fighters anywhere from 147 to 175 wanting a piece of that guy.
And the boxing community at large does expect Canelo Alvarez to fight these fighters. Obviously, one fighter at a time, as he can only fight one fighter at a time, but still, the expectation is there for Canelo. So why isn't it there when it comes to Gervonta?
Where's the pressure?
Very recently, Leonard Ellerby responded to Shakur Stevenson's comments in reference to a Davis fight, saying he's top dog and calls the shots. Shakur can't make an offer.
We've established that, so when are you gonna make it?
If Gervonta is the top dog and he calls the shots, then it's on him to make the offer. So can we get an ETA on that?
Is that too much to ask?
From the business standpoint, Shakur is right. Nobody can make Tank an offer. He's the top dog, and he's always going to be calling the shots because he's the one generating the revenue. So his comment is correct, said Leonard Ellerby to Fight Hype, when told that Shakur, as Stevenson said this week, that he can't make an offer to Gervonta-Davis for a fight because he's a massive pay-per-view draw, and he's not in that position at this stage in his career.
No, Shakur can't make the offer, but Gervonta can, so what's the holdup?
You can't spend as much time as these guys have spent telling people that Gervonta is the A-side and then don't make things happen and then don't make the offer.
Because if you're the A-side the way you say you are, then it's on you to do it, not Shakur.
And I think Shakur is being far too polite about all of this, when in reality, Shakur is a 2-division champion going on a 3-division champion.
He's not some squirrely amateur. He comes from a decorated amateur background and he's established as a professional. One of the young gunners at this weight.
One thing I noticed is that he, Shakur, has a better understanding of how the business goes, said Ellerbe. A lot of times, fans are anxious, and I get it. Tank is killing it. Obviously, coming off of his last fight, he has to have a dance partner, and Ryan Garcia is that and then some.
No. What Ryan Garcia was a popular, albeit very limited fighter, and that's why you fought him. The highest reward for the least risk.
He wasn't more accomplished than Shakur Stevenson, or Devin Haney, or Vasily Lomachenko, or Teofimo Lopez, or Josh Taylor, or any of these other fighters that Gervonta-Davis has overlooked or been guided away from. Ryan wasn't more accomplished than those guys. He wasn't a better fighter than those guys.
No, he was just more popular.
The fight generated incredible revenue. It was one of the biggest live gates in the history of the sport, but Tank has been doing that, generating record-breaking numbers every time, everywhere he goes, said Ellerbe. He packs the house everywhere he goes because, again, he's the most exciting fighter in the entire sport. I get it. The fans are anxious for Gervonta to start fighting the big names.
Gaslighting.
Look at the box office numbers for Gervonta-Davis's fights before the Ryan Garcia fight. What records did he break?
What the fuck is Leonard talking about?
And what records did he break fighting Ryan Garcia? It's not that it didn't do good at the box office. It did. It's not that it didn't make money. We all know it made money. But you didn't break any box office records with that.
And you know what?
What?
You know what, Leonard? If he's as big a draw already as you say, then what the hell is stopping him from fighting Shakur?
You've just got to be patient. because of one thing about all fighters. Fighters fight, and they want to fight. I'm in no way speaking for Tank, said Ellerbe.
They told us to be patient in reference to a Vasily-Lomachenko fight, and I think at this point, it's safe to say that Tank is never going to fight him.
And that's not saying that other fighters haven't fought that same Vasily-Lomachenko. Teofimo Lopez fought him. Devin Haney just fought him.
Gervonta didn't.
We were asking to see Gervonta Davis versus Vasily-Lomachenko. You said no rush. Be patient. Now you're saying that when it comes to Shakur.
So what are you really saying?
You're saying that where Gervonta is right now, he's already breaking records, he's already the top dog, the shot caller, he's all these things and more. What's stopping him from fighting Shakur now? Shakur's ready.
Shakur wants that fight now.
I'm just saying that the big fights are made when it makes sense for both sides. But the fans don't often understand what that means. For one, you've got a fighter like Shakur Stevenson, said Ellerbe.
Bullshit.
If you have time for the Isaac Cruzes of the world and the Hector Luis Garcias of the world, you should have time for the Shakur Stevensons of the world, because not only is he a more talked about fighter,
What, you have time for Rolly Romero, but no time for Shakur Stevenson?
time for Mario Barrios, but no time for Shakur Stevenson. Well, what the hell makes them better than Shakur Stevenson? What makes them more worthy of a Gervonta Davis fight than Shakur?
What the fuck made them so special?
In case this is going over your head, that's a rhetorical question, because there's nothing special about those guys. There was nothing special about those guys. So if you have time for them, how could you not have time for Shakur when you're supposed to be the top dog, the top draw, the shot caller?
Just can the business of boxing crap.
This is not about name value, because you've already fought fighters with less name value than Shakur.
The fuck was Hector Luis Garcia?
Some big kind of draw, big ticket seller? What, he sells a bunch of pay-per-views? No, he does none of those things. But you still fought him, and you still fought him this year.
You fought him.
Top dog, top draw, shot caller, big baller, all those things. So what's stopping the big baller from fighting Shakur? If Shakur can't make him an offer, and both sides acknowledge that, why can't Gervonta make the offer?
Because he's not as good as they say he is.
Because this isn't about drawing power. This is about ability. This is about Gervonta Davis's ability, or the lack thereof, to stay in character against elite competition.
Shakur Stevenson won't say it, but I will. They're afraid.
They're afraid that what just happened to Errol Spence Jr. will happen to Gervonta Davis if you let one of those kids from the other side of the street over the fence. That's what they're afraid of.
You can't prattle on and harp about name value when you're fighting rank amateurs and nobodies like Isaac Cruz and Mario Barrios.
Because what the hell was their name value before Gervonta fought them? And in all actuality, what's their name value afterwards?
Sit now.
The fuck was asking you to fight them? They're asking you to fight Shakur Stevenson. They didn't ask you to fight those guys.
This is not about name value. This is about risks.
Don't believe the sales pitch. Team Davis don't want to take the risk.
When you talk about all these people now who will come out and say, oh, this is disgrace. You know, people on behalf of BOXXER and ultimately on behalf of Sky Sports have been making Chris Eubank Jr. offers and going behind our back to Conor Benn's team to try and make the fight for December. That's how bothered they are about the situation. So we live in a world of hypocrisy in boxing, but ultimately everybody would want to make the Eubank Benn fight. It is the biggest fight in British boxing outside of AJ against Fury, and it ain't even a million miles away from that.
Eddie Hearn is now claiming that BOXXER and Sky Sports have made an attempt to poach the would-be Conor Benn versus Chris Eubank Jr. fight at a time where he's under heavy fire, coming under heavy criticism for still working with Conor Benn, for still staging his fights.
They're so angry that Conor Benn is back.
So bothered.
Obviously, the word cleared certainly been a confusing one for many around with Conor case, Eddie. So
You know, we keep talking about this. If you're cleared to fight, I mean, he's allowed to fight. He's cleared to fight. I don't understand why people can't get that into their brain.
Eddie, can he technically be cleared if obviously there's an appeal ongoing with the board and with the UCATs?
Absolutely. He's cleared to fight. Andy, if he wasn't cleared to fight, he wouldn't be allowed to fight. The ABC have had to rely on the information from the British Boxing Board of Control to confirm that he's cleared to fight. He's no longer suspended. We keep hearing about an appeal. We have no knowledge of that appeal. We have no date of that appeal. What do you expect him to do? That appeal could be next year. What, just sit there when he's cleared to fight? And, you know, I see a lot of stuff on Twitter and stuff like that. We had to go through a process with 4 commissions to make sure that they were comfortable for him to fight. The ABC of America, Texas, the British Boxing Board of Control, and Florida. And they've all confirmed, yes, he is clear to fight. And it really eats people up when they say, he's not clear to fight. Of course he's clear to fight. His suspension has been lifted. Now, if the board appeal, which we don't know, and when that might be, which we don't know, and he's then not cleared to fight, and he loses that case, he's not cleared to fight. But at the moment, he's clear to fight, and that's what he's going to do.
I addressed this in my previous video. It's almost like some want Conor's career to come to an abrupt end. Some seem to want him burned at the stake for his anti-doping fiasco, which is not even the most egregious situation I've seen in the sport of boxing, that there's a different kind of rancor when it comes to Conor Benn, a different kind of attitude.
But for all of the pearl clutching and virtue signaling that we've been seeing, it appears that BOXXER has attempted to backdoor Matchroom in order to stage this fight themselves. So what does that tell you?
Tells you what I've been telling you, that the people in boxing are just a bunch of fucking hypocrites. And the only real reason they've been so focused on Conor Benn's situation is because he's a Matchroom guy. That's just their way of trying to stick it to Eddie. Stick it to Eddie Hearn. Because if they were really standing on principle, they wouldn't be cheering fighters like Canelo Alvarez and Tyson Fury on.
Taking in Oscar Valdez's fights, like the Conceição fight, the Stevenson fight, the more recent Navarrete fight.
That the energy that they keep for Conor is not the energy that they've kept for other fighters or are keeping for other fighters. That this really isn't about doping, demanding that Conor Benn should have to prove his innocence before returning, but
who has?
remember, Tyson Fury said his nandrolone case came from wild boar meat. Uncastrated wild boar meat.
Martin Carefoot himself, the farmer whose testimony they used to corroborate Tyson Fury's story, he eventually came forward and shot holes in that whole goddamn thing.
Did Oscar Valdez ever prove that he was innocent?
Is anyone?
And if by some chance the people at BOXXER were fortunate enough to sweep the rug from under Eddie Hearn's feet, and they actually poached this fight,
Do you think that would stop Eddie Hearn's critics from watching it?
No.
Attending it?
covering it,
No.
do you think they would stand on principle the way they're pretending to with Eddie Hearn?
It's all bullshit.
Hypocritical bullshit.
Fucking shit.
It's fucking bullshit. They're not boycotting Canelo fights or Tyson Fury fights or Oscar Valdez, John Pascal fights. You don't care that much. You only care that it's a Matchroom fighter.
Crap.
The bumbling idiots at BOXXER are so desperate for box office fights.
Why isn't the media criticizing BOXXER more? That it took over a year for people to find out that Amir Khan had tested positive for a banned substance.
The Kell Brook fight, we didn't find that out until many months later. It's almost like someone deliberately covered it up. But when Conor Benn...
Oh, with him it gets leaked to the media.
I think there's more going on here than meets the eye. And for all the pearl clutching that we've been seeing in reference to Conor's anti-doping case, underneath it all
All of Matchroom's competitors would love to stage it, and all of Matchroom's critics would still watch it.
because you're all a bunch of big, fat, fucking hypocrites.
Get off your high horse!
And finally, in men's super middleweight news, veteran promoter Bob Arum favors Canelo over Crawford in a potential fight, saying,
He's the bigger, stronger guy.
that's all anybody can say in reference to this potential matchup, this potential fight so close to Canelo versus Charlo.
Well, you'd have to favor Canelo in that fight because he's the bigger, stronger guy. But we promoted so many Crawford fights, and he is a tremendous talent. So I wouldn't count Crawford out in any fight, although a big favorite is Canelo in that fight.
It was all the way back there in 2003 when we saw Roy Jones Jr. go from light heavyweight up to heavyweight after the Clinton Woods fight. He went up there to heavyweight for John the Quiet Man Ruiz, WBA heavyweight champion at the time.
One of Roy's most famous fights.
Y'all know he beat John the Quiet Man Ruiz. He out-hustled him with his speed, his mobility, agility. These are advantages I think Terence Crawford would have over Canelo Alvarez. What's working for Canelo is that he is the naturally bigger man. He is more durable and stronger, albeit slower.
He's got heavier feet than Terrence.
When the most that people have to say about the fight is that Canelo is too big and Canelo is too strong, these are things that Terence Crawford is more or less accustomed to working around. Crawford has been partially keen on fighting Alvarez, calling it one of the biggest blockbusters in the sport. Canelo versus Crawford is the biggest fight in boxing, Crawford wrote on a post in X, formerly known as Twitter, there's no fighter out there.
There's no fight out there that's bigger than us.
These rare, albeit historical instances, like when Sugar Ray Leonard, after 3 years of inactivity, decided he's going to move up from welter up to middle for the man to beat at middle, marvelous Marvin Hagler.
Or Roy Jones Jr. going up to heavyweight for John Ruiz. Now, I understand that Canelo Alvarez is a lot more to today's super middleweight division than John was to yesterday's heavyweight division. I get that.
That Canelo, overall, is a much, much better caliber of fighter to a Terence Crawford than John Ruiz was to a Roy Jones Jr. But there is a parallel there, because what won Roy the fight was speed, mobility, and agility. Advantages I think Terence would have over Canelo.
It's not the craziest thing I've ever heard.
That Terence could possibly win the fight? No, it's not the craziest thing I've ever heard. Now, if there are some of you out there that feel that Canelo would be too big and too strong and too much for Terence, well, that's not the craziest thing I ever heard either.
Neither would surprise me.
Though at a time when some feel that Canelo Alvarez is in decline, saying they've noticed signs of slippage his last 2 to 3 fights, that he's slowing down and he's not the fighter that he was 3 years ago, that would make this the most opportune time for such an endeavor.
Crawford's coming off of selling over 600,000 pay-per-views opposite the ring Errol Spence Jr.
It's a hell of a lot more pay-per-views than, say, David Benavidez sold with Caleb Plant.
What that tells me is that if you did make a fight between Terence and Canelo, it would sell. Canelo Alvarez by himself sells.
But a fight with 2 fighters of this caliber, especially now that Terence Crawford is riding high after his domination of his longtime rival, Errol Spence Jr., this could be a very, very big money fight.
It could.
Canelo Alvarez himself understands that he is under some pressure to look the part opposite the ring Jermell Charlo later on this month. And perhaps if he does,
Because he still feels he's in his prime.
I'm open to a Terence Crawford versus Canelo Alvarez fight just as much as I'm open to a David Benavidez versus Canelo Alvarez fight. I'm open for either. I'm okay with either.
But only one of those fights features 2 pound-for-pound elites, 2 pound-for-pound fighters, not just one.
It's rare instances when a fighter has so much of what it takes that he can actually move up in weight and do the unthinkable, a real David and Goliath kind of deal.
That spectacle.
Could Terence Crawford be that fighter? In this era of boxers, is Terence Crawford
Is he the one?